The fluorescent lights of Giuseppe's trattoria hummed their usual tired song, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that made even the fresh pasta look days old. My feet throbbed inside my worn sneakers. The left sole had been peeling for weeks now, flapping slightly with each step like a whispered reminder of everything I couldn't afford to replace. The kitchen's heat clung to my skin, mixing with the scent of garlic, tomato sauce, and my own exhaustion. "Table 12 needs water," Marco barked from the pass, not bothering to look at me. Nobody really looked at me. I was the fat girl who bussed tables, refilled bread baskets, and disappeared into the background, like the faded wallpaper peeling near the bathroom hallway. I grabbed the pitcher, my reflection catching in the stainless steel. Round face, limp brown hair escaping its ponytail, uniform stretched across curves that felt more like burdens than blessings. 26 years old and invisible. The story of my life, really. The dining room buzzed with the usual Friday night crowd, couples leaning close over candlelight, business associates laughing too loud over expensive wine, families celebrating something I'd never quite understand. I moved between tables like a ghost, collecting empty plates, refilling glasses, existing in the margins of other people's happiness. That's when the air changed. I felt it before I saw anything. A shift in the atmosphere, like pressure dropping before a storm. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they softened. Heads turned. The hostess, Maria, stood straighter, smoothing her hair with trembling fingers. 3 men entered through the front door. The first 2 wore dark suits that probably cost more than my annual rent, their eyes scanning the room with mechanical precision. They moved like predators, all controlled power and coiled threat. But it was the third man who made my breath catch somewhere between my lungs and throat. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair styled in that effortlessly perfect way that suggested expensive barbers and products I'd never heard of. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been painted onto his frame. But it wasn't his clothes that made every woman in the restaurant pause mid-sentence. It was the way he carried danger like cologne. Sharp jawline, eyes so dark they looked black even in the restaurant's dim lighting. And when he moved, there was this fluid grace that suggested violence carefully leashed. He didn't walk into Giuseppe's. He claimed it, his presence expanding to fill every corner, even though he'd barely crossed the threshold. "Mr. Salvatore." Giuseppe himself appeared from the back office, wiping his hands nervously on his apron. Our owner never greeted customers personally. Never. "Your usual table is ready. We've been expecting you." I hadn't known we were expecting anyone. The man, Salvatore, didn't smile. He simply gave a slight nod, and Giuseppe practically tripped over himself, leading the trio toward the private corner booth, the one we kept reserved but I'd never actually seen occupied. As they passed, I caught a whiff of his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and leather and something else I couldn't name, something that made my pulse skip erratically. "Move!" Marco hissed behind me, and I realized I'd frozen in the middle of the aisle, water pitcher clutched to my chest like a shield. I stumbled aside, and that's when it happened. My shoe, that damned peeling sole, caught on the edge of a chair leg. The world tilted. The pitcher flew from my hands in what felt like slow motion, water arcing through the air in a crystal spray that caught the light like scattered diamonds. Time suspended itself. The water hit him, Salvatore, square in the chest, soaked through that expensive suit, darkening the gray to black, spreading across the fabric like a stain of my absolute humiliation. Ice cubes clattered against his shoes. Water dripped from the edge of his jacket. The restaurant went silent. Not the quiet of before, but the terrible, suffocating silence of witnesses to an execution. I stood there, empty pitcher dangling from my fingers, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to do anything but stare at the spreading water stain across the chest of what was clearly the most dangerous man I'd ever encountered. His bodyguards moved instantly, hands reaching inside their jackets, but Salvatore lifted one hand, barely a gesture, just a slight rise of his fingers, and they froze. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but directly into me with those bottomless black eyes. His gaze traveled from my horrified face down to my stained uniform, my trembling hands, my stupid broken shoe, and back up again. I watched something flicker across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity, before it smoothed into something unreadable. My voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I didn't... My shoe, it caught... The words tumbled out in a pathetic rush. I'll pay for the dry cleaning. Please, I'm so sorry. He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was something unexpected and potentially interesting. The silence stretched between us, heavy and dangerous. I could feel Giuseppe hovering nearby, probably calculating how quickly he could fire me and throw me out before this man decided to have me killed. Because that's what men like this did, wasn't it? I might have been invisible most of my life, but I wasn't stupid. The way everyone reacted to him, the bodyguards, the private table, the fear rippling through the staff. This was someone important, someone powerful, someone I'd just drenched in ice water. What's your name? His voice was low, smooth, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. Not the question I'd expected. Sophia, I managed. Sophia Russo. Sophia. He repeated it like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. How long have you worked here? 2 years. Why was he asking me questions? Why wasn't he screaming? I'm really sorry, Mr. Salvatore. One of his men appeared with a napkin, which he ignored, his eyes never leaving my face. Dante Salvatore. The name meant nothing to me, but I watched Giuseppe pale beside us. Clearly it should have meant something. Sir, please, Giuseppe rushed forward, wringing his hands. The girl is clumsy, always has been. I'll fire her immediately. There's no need for... Did I ask you to fire her? Dante's voice didn't rise, but Giuseppe stopped mid-sentence like he'd been slapped. In fact, did I ask you anything at all? No, sir. Of course not. I apologize. Dante's attention returned to me, and I felt pinned by it, like a butterfly under glass. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see water droplets caught in the dark fabric of his suit, close enough to smell that cologne again, mixed now with the faint scent of my own fear sweat. You're shaking, he observed. I'm sorry, I whispered for what felt like the 100th time. Something shifted in his expression, something almost like amusement, though his mouth never quite smiled. You apologize too much, Sophia Russo. He turned to one of his bodyguards, Marco. Not our Marco, apparently, because a different man stepped forward immediately. Give her $500 for the inconvenience. What? No, the words burst out before I could stop them. I mean, you don't need to do that. I'm the one who should be paying you. Now he did smile, just slightly, and it transformed his face from dangerously handsome to something that made my stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. I insist. Consider it compensation for emotional distress. But I caused the distress, I protested weakly, as the bodyguard pulled out a wallet thick with bills. Did you? Dante tilted his head again, that curious expression returning. Or did your employer cause it by not replacing your broken shoes? I blinked. He'd noticed my shoe. In all of that, with water soaking through his expensive suit and ice cubes scattered across the floor, he'd noticed my peeling sole. The bodyguard pressed the money into my hand, more cash than I'd held in my entire life. My fingers closed around it automatically, and I stood there feeling like I'd stumbled into some alternate reality where physics worked differently. Thank you, I stammered. But really, your suit is insured. He was already turning away, dismissing me. But then he paused, glancing back over his shoulder. Sophia. Yes? Get new shoes. Those are dangerous. There was something in his voice, not quite concern, but not quite indifference either. Something that made my skin prickle with awareness. Then he was gone, swept into the private booth with his men, leaving me standing in a puddle of water and melting ice, clutching $500 and trying to remember how to breathe properly. Giuseppe grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. What the hell was that? Do you have any idea who that man is? No, I admitted, my voice still shaky. Dante Salvatore controls half the businesses in this city. He could buy Giuseppe's 50 times over and never notice the money missing. He's Giuseppe lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. He's not someone you spill water on and live to tell about it, but I had lived. Not only lived, but walked away with $500, and the memory of those dark eyes looking at me, really looking at me. For the first time in my forgettable life, I should have been relieved, should have been grateful for the narrow escape, should have taken the money, bought new shoes, and forgotten the whole terrifying encounter. Instead, I found myself glancing toward that private booth throughout the rest of my shift, catching glimpses through the partition. Dante sat with his back to the wall. Of course he did, I realized. He could see every entrance and exit from there, speaking in low tones to his companions. Once, just once, I felt his gaze land on me as I cleared a nearby table, heavy and assessing and entirely too aware. When I looked up, he was already turned away, but I felt the weight of his attention like a physical touch. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of adrenaline and confusion. Other servers whispered in the kitchen, shooting me looks that ranged from envious to terrified. Apparently surviving an encounter with Dante Salvatore was noteworthy. Apparently, I'd done something remarkable by simply existing in his presence without disappearing. He left an hour later without ordering anything. Just sat there with his men, conducting what looked like business, then departed as abruptly as he'd arrived. I was in the kitchen when it happened, but I felt the shift in atmosphere when he left. Like a storm passing, leaving everything strangely calm in its wake. Giuseppe found me as I was untying my apron at the end of my shift. "You're lucky," he said flatly. "Don't push your luck. If he comes back, you stay in the kitchen. Understand?" I nodded, even though I didn't understand anything about what had happened. Why had he given me money? Why had he noticed my shoe? Why had he looked at me like I was something worth seeing? The November air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside, cold enough to make my breath fog. I pulled my thin jacket tighter and started the 6-block walk to my apartment, the $500 burning a hole in my pocket. With this money, I could pay my late electric bill, buy groceries, get new shoes, and still have enough left over for next month's rent. It felt like winning the lottery. It felt like disaster narrowly avoided. It felt like the universe had glitched just for a moment and let me matter. I was half a block from my building when the black SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing the same bodyguard who'd given me the money, Marco, Dante had called him. His face was professionally neutral. "Get in." My heart stopped. "What?" "Mr. Salvatore wants to speak with you." "But Why?" Panic clawed up my throat. This was it. The other shoe dropping. He'd seemed amused at the restaurant, but now, away from witnesses, What? What did dangerous men do to clumsy waitresses who ruined their suits? "Just get in, Miss Russo," not a request. The back door opened, and I saw him there in the shadows, Dante Salvatore, sitting in that same wet suit, looking at me with those bottomless eyes. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to run. But where would I run to? Men like this didn't make requests you could refuse. My legs moved without permission from my brain, carrying me to the open door. I climbed in clumsily, my broken shoe catching on the running board. And suddenly I was sitting in the most luxurious vehicle I'd ever seen. Mere inches from the most dangerous man I'd ever met. The door closed with a soft final click. The leather seat was so soft, it felt like sitting on a cloud. The interior smelled like new car and that cedar cologne and something else. Power, maybe, if power had a scent. Dante sat angled toward me, one arm draped casually across the back of the seat. His wet shirt clinging to what I could now see was a very well-built chest. "You're afraid of me," he observed. Not a question. Should I be? My voice came out steadier than I felt. That almost smile again, smart and honest, refreshing. He studied me in the dim light filtering through tinted windows. "I have a proposition for you, Sophia Russo." Oh, God. This was worse than I thought. My mind raced through possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. I'm not... Relax. He waved a hand dismissively. "It's not what you're thinking, though your panic is somewhat amusing." Then what? I forced myself to meet his eyes, even though it felt like staring into an abyss. He leaned forward, close enough that I could see gold flecks in those dark irises, close enough that his cologne wrapped around me like smoke. I want you to marry me. The words hung in the air between us, impossible and insane. What? I must have heard him wrong. The universe didn't glitch that much. Marry me, he repeated calmly, like he was discussing the weather. 6 months. You play the role of my wife, attend events with me, live in my house. In return, you get $5 million when it's over. $5 million. The number was so absurd I almost laughed. Would have laughed if I wasn't so terrified. Why? Because I made a bet, he said simply. And I always win my bets. A bet. I repeated the words slowly, trying to make them make sense in my exhausted, terrified brain. You want to marry me because of a bet. $5 million. He said it like the number explained everything. Like it justified the absolute insanity of what he was proposing. I pressed myself against the car door, putting as much distance as possible between us in the confined space. This is crazy. You're crazy. I need to go home. You live in a 4th-floor walk-up on Morrison Street, Dante said casually, and ice flooded my veins. Apartment 4C. Your rent is 3 months overdue. Your electricity was shut off last week, and you're currently showering at the gym 2 blocks from Giuseppe's because you can't afford to pay the reconnection fee. The blood drained from my face. How do you... I know everything about everyone who interests me. He pulled out his phone, swiping through it with casual efficiency. Sophia Marie Russo, 26 years old, parents deceased, car accident when you were 19, no siblings, student loans from a nursing degree you never finished when the money ran out, 3 jobs currently, Giuseppe's, a laundromat on 5th Street, and weekend shifts at a convenience store. He looked up, those dark eyes pinning me. You work 70 hours a week and still can't make ends meet. You're drowning, Sophia. I'm offering you a life raft. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Why me? There are thousands of women in this city who would say yes immediately, he interrupted. Who would see the money and ignore the rest. That's exactly why not them. He shifted closer, and I had nowhere to retreat. My business associates believe I'm incapable of commitment, that I'm too volatile, too unpredictable to build the family empire my father wants. There's a merger in the works, legitimate business mostly, but the other family won't seal the deal without proof of my stability. So marry someone else, someone beautiful, someone who fits your world. I don't need someone who fits, he said softly, dangerously. I need someone who will make them underestimate me. Someone they'll look at and think, he married her for love. Look how far he's fallen. Someone who will make them drop their guard. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. He wanted me because I was fat, because I was plain, because I was so obviously beneath him that our marriage would look like weakness instead of strategy. You want me because I'm pathetic, I whispered. Something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt, but close. I want you because you're perfect for what I need, and in return, you get $5 million, enough to never be pathetic again. I'm not... My voice broke. I won't be someone's joke, someone's pity case. This isn't pity. He leaned back, giving me space to breathe. This is business. I need a wife who will play a role. You need money to survive. We both get what we want. For 6 months. 6 months, he confirmed. Live in my house. Attend events as my wife. Convince everyone our marriage is real. Then we divorce quietly. You get your money, and you disappear into whatever life you want to build. I stared at him, my mind racing through implications and consequences. $5 million. I could pay off my debts, finish my nursing degree, buy a small house somewhere far from here. I could stop being invisible, stop being the fat girl who scrubbed floors and served pasta to people who never saw her face, but I'd have to live with him, be touched by him, pretend to love him while knowing every moment that I was his joke, his strategic weakness, his calculated humiliation. I can't, I said finally. I'm sorry, but I can't. I reached for the door handle. His hand shot out, not grabbing me, but pressing against the door to keep it closed. $50,000 up front, he said quietly. Tonight, before you even say yes officially. Enough to solve your immediate problems. My hand froze on the handle. $50,000. I could pay rent, turn my electricity back on, eat something other than ramen and stolen breadsticks from work. I could breathe. Why are you doing this? I turned to face him, needing to understand. Really, not the business reasons. Why me specifically? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost contemplative. Because when you looked at me tonight, after you spilled that water, you weren't afraid of who I was. You were afraid of losing your job, of not being able to survive. That kind of fear, he trailed off. That kind of fear is honest. Everything in my world is calculated, Sophia. People smile at me because they want something or because they're terrified. You smiled at a customer before you knew who I was. That's rare. I didn't smile at you, I protested weakly. No, he agreed. You apologized 17 times and looked like you wanted to disappear into the floor. But before that, when you were serving table 8, you smiled at the little girl who spilled her juice. You cleaned it up and told her it happened to you all the time, made her feel better about her mistake. He'd been watching me. Before the water incident, before everything, he'd been watching me move through the restaurant. The realization sent chills down my spine. I don't understand you, I whispered. You don't need to understand me, you just need to say yes. He pulled out a phone, different from the one before, I noticed. How many phones did he carry? 50,000 tonight, 5 million in 6 months. All you have to do is play house with me and look convincing doing it. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to refuse, to get out of this car and run as far as possible from Dante Salvatore and his dangerous eyes and his impossible propositions. But rationality didn't pay rent. Rationality didn't turn the electricity back on, or put food in my empty refrigerator, or fix the constant grinding fear of losing everything. What if I can't do it? I asked. What if I'm a terrible actress? What if no one believes we're really married? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. He was already texting someone, his thumbs moving quickly across the screen. But I don't think you'll have trouble. You've been acting your whole life, haven't you? Pretending you're fine when you're falling apart. Smiling at customers when you want to scream. Playing the invisible girl when you're anything but. The accuracy of his observation stole my breath. How did he see me so clearly when I'd spent years making sure no one could? I need rules, I said suddenly. If I do this, and I'm not saying yes yet, I need rules. Boundaries. He looked up from his phone, one eyebrow raised. Such as? Separate bedrooms. No. I struggled to find words that didn't make me sound like a terrified virgin. No physical expectations beyond what's necessary for appearances. Agreed. I want the 50,000 in cash tonight. And a contract. In writing. With a lawyer. Done. And I hesitated but forced myself to continue. I want to know what I'm really getting into. What kind of danger? What kind of life? I'm not stupid, Mr. Salvatore. I know you're not just a businessman. His smile was sharp as a blade. No, you're definitely not stupid. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, bringing us closer together. I'm the head of the Salvatore family. We control shipping, construction, several casinos, and various other enterprises throughout the city. Some legitimate, some less so. My enemies would love to use you against me. My allies will question your suitability. You'll be in danger the moment you say yes. Then why would I say yes? Because you're already in danger, Sophia. You're just drowning slowly instead of all at once. At least with me, you'll have protection, security. A chance at something better than waiting tables until your body gives out and you die alone in that apartment with the broken heater. The brutal honesty should have offended me. Instead, it felt almost refreshing. No pretense. No gentle lies. Just the ugly truth laid out between us. I want to think about it, I said. Not long. Just tonight. Let me sleep on it and give you an answer tomorrow. No. He straightened, his face hardening. This offer expires when you leave this car. Yes or no, Sophia? Right now. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. His voice was cold, businesslike. But it's real. And it's now. In 30 seconds. Either you're my fiancé and $50,000 richer, or you're walking home to your dark apartment with nothing but the memory of what you could have had. Choose. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was insane. Marrying a stranger. A dangerous stranger. A mafioso who wanted to use me as a prop in whatever game he was playing. But $5 million. A life. A future. A chance to be something other than invisible. Yes, I whispered before I could stop myself. I'll do it. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between us. Satisfaction, maybe, or possession. Smart girl. He pressed his phone to his ear. Bring the package to Morrison Street, apartment 4C, and make sure no one sees you. He ended the call, and looked at me with those bottomless eyes. Someone will be at your apartment in 30 minutes with the cash and the contract. Read every word. Sign it. Tomorrow a car will pick you up at 8 a.m. Bring whatever you want to keep. Everything else will be provided. Tomorrow? My voice squeaked. But I haven't. Giuseppe needs notice, and my other jobs are no longer your concern. He reached across me, opening the door. Cold air rushed in. You work for me now, Sophia. Only me. The possessiveness in his tone made something flutter nervously in my stomach. I need to give proper notice. I can't just... You can, and you will. He was already pulling out another phone, typing something. Giuseppe will receive a generous payment for the inconvenience of losing you. Your other employers will be similarly compensated. By tomorrow morning, you won't exist in that world anymore. You can't just erase my life. I can do anything I want. Not a boast, just a fact stated calmly. That's what you're not understanding yet, Sophia. The moment you said yes, your old life ended. Tomorrow you become someone new. Someone protected. Someone mine. The word mine hung in the air like a promise and a threat. I climbed out of the SUV on shaking legs, the cold pavement solid beneath my broken shoe. He leaned forward, his face illuminated by the interior light. Don't make me regret choosing you, he said softly. I hate being disappointed. Before I could respond, the door closed and the SUV pulled away, leaving me standing on the empty street with my heart racing and my entire future rewritten in the span of 20 minutes. I walked the remaining block to my building in a daze, my mind spinning. What had I done? What had I agreed to? Marry Dante Salvatore. Live in his house. Pretend to love a man who saw me as a strategic tool, all for money. All because I was too desperate, too tired, too broken to say no. My apartment felt colder and darker than usual when I let myself in. The lack of electricity made shadows pool in corners, turned familiar objects into strange shapes. I lit the 2 candles I kept for emergencies, which was most nights lately, and sat on my sagging couch, waiting. 37 minutes later, exactly as promised, someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole, saw a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, and felt my stomach flip. This was real. This was actually happening. I opened the door. The man, not Marco from the car, someone different, held out a briefcase. Miss Russo, I'm Vincent. Mr. Salvatore sent me. His voice was professionally neutral, his face forgettable. May I come in? I stepped aside, and he entered my tiny apartment without comment on the candles, or the coldness or the general air of poverty that clung to everything I owned. He set the briefcase on my coffee table and opened it, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills and a thick sheaf of papers. $50,000, as promised. Vincent gestured to the cash. Count it if you'd like. And here's the contract. Mr. Salvatore suggested you read it carefully. My hands shook as I picked up the contract. It was thick, official, filled with legal language I barely understood. But certain phrases jumped out. Period of marriage, 6 months minimum. Payment upon dissolution, $5 million. Requirement of cohabitation. Attendance at designated social functions. Termination clause. There's a termination clause, I said, looking up at Vincent. If you fail to fulfill the terms of the agreement, the marriage ends immediately, and you receive nothing. His expression remained neutral. Mr. Salvatore is very specific about his expectations. I kept reading. The contract outlined everything. Where I'd live, what events I'd attend, even what kind of behavior was expected in public, but nowhere did it mention anything physical. No clause about intimacy or expectations beyond the performance of being his wife in public. He'd kept his word about that, at least. "There's a pen in the briefcase," Vincent prompted gently. "Sign all 3 copies. One for you, one for Mr. Salvatore, one for the lawyer." I stared at the signature line. This was my last chance, last moment to back out, to return to my small, safe, suffocating life, to remain invisible and poor, but at least my own. I thought about the electricity bill, the eviction notice tucked under my mattress, the way my stomach cramped with hunger most nights, the endless grinding fear of losing everything and having nowhere to go. I picked up the pen and signed my name. Sophia Marie Russo, 3 times, in blue ink that looked almost black in the candlelight. Excellent. Vincent collected 2 of the contracts, leaving one for me. "The car will arrive at 8 a.m. sharp. Be ready." He was gone before I could respond, the door closing softly behind him. I sat alone in my dark apartment, surrounded by $50,000 in cash, and the contract that had just sold my life for the next 6 months. I should have felt relieved, excited even. Instead, I felt like I'd just signed away something far more valuable than my time. I felt like I'd signed away myself. But when I counted the money, crisp bills that smelled new and felt like possibility, and thought about turning on lights, buying food, breathing without panic for the first time in years, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Not yet, anyway. The black Mercedes arrived at exactly 8 a.m., idling in front of my building like a sleek predator. I stood at my window, watching it through the gap in my curtains, a duffel bag at my feet containing everything I'd decided was worth keeping, which wasn't much. Some clothes that probably wouldn't fit Dante Salvatore's world, a few books, the photograph of my parents on their wedding day, and my mother's necklace, the only jewelry I owned. I'd spent the night awake, electricity humming through the apartment, thanks to the first thing I'd done with the cash, pay every outstanding bill. The lights felt alien after a week of darkness, the heater's warmth almost uncomfortable after so many cold nights. I'd taken a long shower in my own bathroom, standing under the hot water until my skin turned pink, crying without fully understanding why. Relief, maybe, or terror, or the strange, disorienting grief of leaving behind a life I'd hated, but at least understood. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "The car is waiting." Dante's voice smooth and commanding even through the speaker. "Don't make me come up there, Sophia. I'm coming." I managed, grabbing my bag. My hands shook as I locked the apartment door one final time, leaving the key under the mat as instructed. Someone would come for my furniture, what little there was. The rest would be handled. Everything erased, just like he'd promised. Marco, the bodyguard from the SUV, stood beside the Mercedes, opening the back door as I approached. "Miss Russo." "Just Sophia," I said quietly, climbing inside. Dante sat in the far corner, looking somehow more intimidating in daylight. He wore another suit, navy this time, equally expensive, and his dark hair caught the morning sun streaming through the tinted windows. He was on his phone, speaking rapid Italian to someone, his voice clipped and authoritative. I settled into the seat, clutching my duffel bag like a security blanket. The car pulled smoothly into traffic, and I watched my neighborhood disappear through the window. The convenience store where I'd worked weekends. The laundromat where I'd spent countless hours folding other people's clothes. Giuseppe's trattoria, its neon sign dark in the morning light. All of it fading behind me like a dream I was forgetting upon waking. Dante ended his call and finally looked at me. His gaze traveled from my face to the duffel bag, one eyebrow rising slightly. "That's everything?" "I travel light," I said defensively. "Apparently." He reached forward, opening a compartment I hadn't noticed, pulling out a small velvet box. "Give me your left hand." My heart stuttered. "What?" "Your hand, Sophia." Impatience edged his tone. "We're engaged. You need a ring." I extended my hand slowly, watching as he opened the box to reveal a ring that made my breath catch. A massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in what looked like platinum. The morning light hit it, sending rainbow fractals dancing across the car's interior. "This is..." I couldn't find words. "This is too much. It's expected." He took my hand, his fingers warm and slightly rough against my skin. My fiancé wears a ring that reflects my status. Anything less would raise questions. He slid it onto my finger, and I felt the weight of it. Physical and symbolic. The band fit perfectly, like he'd somehow known my ring size. Which he probably had. He seemed to know everything else about me. "It's beautiful," I whispered, unable to stop staring at it. "It's a tool," he corrected, releasing my hand. "Like everything else in this arrangement, don't get attached to it." The casual cruelty stung, but I forced myself to nod. Right. This wasn't real. The ring wasn't a symbol of love, it was a prop. Just like me. The drive took us out of my familiar streets into neighborhoods I'd only seen in magazines, tree-lined avenues, mansions set back from the road behind iron gates, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself, because everyone already knew it existed. Finally, we turned through a set of massive gates that opened automatically, rolling up a long driveway toward a house that looked more like a museum. 3 stories of pale stone and tall windows, surrounded by manicured gardens even in late November. A fountain bubbled in the circular drive. Everything screamed old money, power, permanence. "This is where you live?" The words escaped before I could stop them. "This is where we live," he corrected. "Starting now." The car stopped in front of the main entrance, and Marco opened my door. I climbed out, feeling impossibly small and out of place. My worn jeans and cheap jacket looked like costume pieces from a different play entirely. Dante moved beside me, his hand suddenly at the small of my back, possessive and guiding. "Walk like you belong here," he murmured near my ear. "The staff is watching." I looked up and saw faces in windows, figures moving behind curtains. Of course they were watching. The boss was bringing home his unexpected bride. The front door opened before we reached it, revealing an older woman in a crisp black dress, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, traveled over me with obvious disapproval. "Mrs. Chen," Dante said smoothly. "This is Sophia, my fiancée. She'll be living here from now on. Please ensure the staff understands she's to be treated with the same respect as myself." Mrs. Chen's lips thinned. "Of course, Mr. Salvatore." Her tone suggested anything but respect. "Should I prepare the mistress suite?" "The mistress suite will remain closed," Dante said, his voice hardening. "Sophia will use the room adjacent to mine, the one with the connecting door." My head snapped toward him, but his expression remained neutral, giving nothing away. A connecting door. Jesus. "Very well, sir." Mrs. Chen stepped aside, allowing us to enter. The interior made the exterior look modest. Marble floors, high ceilings with crystal chandeliers, a sweeping staircase that belonged in a Hollywood movie, art on the walls that was probably worth more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Everything pristine, expensive, and utterly intimidating. "I'll show you to your room," Dante said, already moving toward the stairs. "You have 2 hours to settle in. Then we have an appointment downtown." "What kind of appointment?" I hurried after him, my footsteps echoing on the marble, the kind that transforms you from a waitress into someone believable as my wife. He climbed the stairs without looking back, forcing me to follow. Clothes, hair, everything. My fiancé can't attend events looking like— He stopped himself. Like a fat girl in cheap jeans? I finished bitterly. He turned on the landing, and something flickered across his face. Like someone who's been surviving instead of living. There's a difference, Sophia. The distinction felt important to him, though I didn't fully understand why. He continued down a hallway lined with more art, more evidence of wealth I couldn't comprehend, until he stopped in front of a door. "Your room." He pushed it open, revealing a space larger than my entire apartment. A 4-poster bed with silk sheets, a sitting area with a fireplace, tall windows overlooking the gardens. An ensuite bathroom visible through another door, all marble and gold fixtures. It was the most beautiful room I'd ever seen. It felt like a museum, cold and perfect, and not meant for someone like me. "The closet is there," Dante pointed. "Though you won't need what you brought. Everything will be replaced. The bathroom is stocked with everything you'll need. And that," he gestured to a door on the far wall, "connects to my room. It stays unlocked on my side. You can lock it on yours if it makes you feel better." Why does it need to connect at all? The question came out more accusatory than I'd intended. His smile was sharp. Because married couples share space, Sophia. If someone, a staff member, a business associate, anyone, suspects we're not really together, this arrangement ends. The connecting doors for appearances. Use it or don't. I don't particularly care. He started to leave, then paused at the threshold. One more thing. Starting now, you eat every meal, no skipping. Mrs. Chen will prepare whatever you want. I need you healthy, not collapsing from hunger. Heat flooded my cheeks. I know exactly how little you've been eating. He interrupted. Your body shows it. Your skin, your hair, everything. That ends now. You're under my protection, which means you're under my care, whether you like it or not. He left before I could respond, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow felt like a cell door locking. I stood in the middle of the enormous room, still clutching my pathetic duffel bag, feeling like an imposter in a life that couldn't possibly be mine. The ring on my finger caught the light, reminding me this was real. I'd made a deal, sold myself for 6 months and $5 million. The connecting door mocked me from across the room. I walked to it slowly, testing the handle. Locked from his side, just as he'd said. But knowing he could open it any time, walk through, invade my space, it made my skin prickle with awareness I didn't want to examine. I unpacked my duffel bag, hanging my few clothes in the massive closet where they looked lost and shabby among the empty space waiting to be filled. My mother's photograph went on the nightstand. Her necklace around my neck, the familiar weight comforting. A knock on the door made me jump. Come in, I called, expecting Mrs. Chen. Instead, a young woman entered, maybe a few years older than me, with kind eyes and a friendly smile. She wore the same black dress as Mrs. Chen, but carried herself differently, less severe, more approachable. Hi, I'm Maria, she said warmly. I'm one of the housekeepers. Mrs. Chen asked me to check if you needed anything. I'm okay, thank you. I gestured awkwardly around the room. This is all a lot. Maria's smile widened. It's intimidating at first, but you'll get used to it. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, we're all thrilled Mr. Salvatore is finally settling down. He's been alone too long. Guilt twisted in my stomach. These people thought this was real, thought I was here because Dante loved me. I'm not sure I fit here, I admitted quietly. Nobody fits anywhere until they decide to. Maria said wisely. Give it time. And if you need anything at all, just ask for me. I'm happy to help. She left, and I felt marginally better. At least one person in this house didn't look at me like I was an unwelcome intruder. I spent the next hour exploring my room, discovering drawers full of expensive linens, a bathroom stocked with products I'd never heard of, a small library of books on a shelf by the window. Everything provided, everything perfect, everything designed to make me comfortable in this golden cage. At exactly 10 o'clock, Dante knocked once before entering without waiting for permission. He'd changed into more casual clothes. Dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous instead of less. Ready? He asked. For what exactly? Your transformation. His eyes traveled over me assessingly. We're meeting with a stylist. She'll handle your wardrobe, determine what colors work best, take measurements, then hair and makeup consultants. By tonight, you'll look the part. The part of what? I asked, even though I knew the answer. My wife. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Someone who belongs at my side. Someone my enemies will underestimate and my allies will question. Someone who makes me look capable of love. The clinical way he described it hurt more than it should have. And what if I can't pull it off? What if I'm still just me? No matter what clothes you put me in? He moved closer, invading my space with that predatory grace. His hand came up, fingers catching my chin, tilting my face toward the light. You're already more than you think you are, Sophia. You just need to believe it. The gentleness in his touch contrasted sharply with the hardness in his eyes, and I didn't know which to trust. Maybe neither. Maybe both. Come, he said, releasing me. The car is waiting, and Francesca doesn't tolerate lateness. The drive downtown passed in tense silence. I watched the city slide by, my mind spinning with everything that had happened in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, I was a waitress drowning in debt. Today, I was engaged to a mafia boss, living in a mansion, about to be transformed into someone unrecognizable. We pulled up to a building in the fashion district, the kind of place I'd never dared enter before. Marco opened my door, and Dante's hand was immediately at my back again, guiding me inside. The boutique was all white surfaces and minimalist elegance. A woman emerged from the back, tall, impossibly thin, dressed in black with severe red lipstick. Her eyes fixed on me with the intensity of a predator sizing up prey. "Dante, darling." She air-kissed both his cheeks, then turned to me. "And this must be the infamous Sophia. My God, you weren't exaggerating." I bristled. "Exaggerating about what?" "About the challenge, of course." Francesca circled me slowly, humming to herself. "Good bone structure, excellent skin beneath the exhaustion, beautiful eyes, though you hide them. And the body?" She gestured vaguely. "We can work with this. It'll take effort, but yes, I can make you stunning." "She already is," Dante said quietly, and both Francesca and I looked at him in surprise. He didn't elaborate, just checked his phone like he hadn't said anything significant. "Well then," Francesca clapped her hands together, "let's begin, shall we? We have much work to do and very little time. Dante, you can go. This will take hours. I'll stay," he said, settling into a chair near the window. "Suit yourself." Francesca beckoned me forward. "Come, Sophia. Let's find out who you really are underneath all that hiding." The next 4 hours were a blur of measuring tapes, fabric swatches, and Francesca's running commentary. She pulled dress after dress, holding them against me, discarding most with theatrical sighs. The ones she approved were elegant, expensive, and designed to showcase rather than conceal. "You've been hiding this body," she scolded, cinching a deep green dress at my waist. "Why? You're gorgeous." "Curves are power, darling. Own them." I caught sight of myself in the three-way mirror and barely recognized the reflection. The dress fit perfectly, emphasizing my waist, the curve of my hips. I looked like someone who might actually belong next to Dante Salvatore. "That one," Dante said from his chair, his voice cutting through Francesca's chatter. "Definitely that one." Our eyes met in the mirror, and something passed between us, electric and dangerous, and entirely too real for what this was supposed to be. "Green it is," Francesca agreed. "We'll do more in jewel tones. Emerald, sapphire, deep burgundy. And we'll need evening gowns, casual wear, business-appropriate outfits, everything." She wasn't kidding about everything. By the time we finished, I had an entire wardrobe being sent to the house. Shoes, bags, jewelry to complement the clothes. Things I'd never dreamed of owning. "Hair and makeup tomorrow," Francesca declared. "For tonight you'll do. Barely. But tomorrow we create a masterpiece." Dante stood, buttoning his jacket. "Thank you, Francesca. Send the bill to my office." "Always a pleasure, darling." She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "You're lucky, you know. Dante doesn't do anything without purpose. If he chose you, there's a reason beyond what you see." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I was a prop, a strategy, a bet, but Dante's hand was already guiding me toward the door, and the moment passed. The drive home was quiet again, but different somehow. Charged. I kept catching him watching me in the reflection of the window, his expression unreadable. "You did well today," he said finally. "I stood there while someone dressed me like a doll," I countered. "That's not exactly an achievement." "You didn't run," he clarified. "You didn't break down or refuse or make this difficult. That's more than I expected." "What did you expect?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I expected you to back out this morning. To decide the money wasn't worth it. Maybe I'm just desperate," I said bitterly. "Maybe." He shifted closer, and I felt the heat of him, the dangerous pull. "Or maybe you're braver than you know." His fingers found mine, and I realized he was straightening the engagement ring that had twisted on my finger. The touch was gentle, almost intimate, and I forgot to breathe. "Tomorrow night," he said softly. "We attend our first event together, a charity gala. Everyone who matters will be there. You'll wear that green dress and you'll smile and you'll convince them all that I'm capable of loving someone like you." "Someone like me," I repeated hollowly. "Someone real," he corrected, his dark eyes intense. Someone who reminds me I'm still human underneath everything else. Can you do that, Sophia? I looked at our joined hands, at the ring that bound me to him for 6 months, at the face that had haunted my thoughts since the moment I'd spilled water on him. I can try, I whispered. His smile was small but genuine. That's all I'm asking. But as we pulled through the gates of his mansion, my new prison and palace combined, I wondered if trying would be enough, or if I'd already lost myself in the first 2 days of being his bought and paid for bride. The charity gala was held at the Grandview Hotel, a towering monument to wealth and excess in the heart of the city. I stared up at it from the back seat of Dante's Mercedes, my stomach twisting into knots that no amount of deep breathing could untangle. Stop fidgeting, Dante said quietly beside me. He looked devastating in a black tuxedo, the crisp white shirt emphasizing his olive skin, the bow tie somehow making him look more dangerous instead of civilized. You'll wrinkle the dress. I forced my hands to still in my lap, though it took effort. Francesca had been right about the green dress. It transformed me. The emerald silk clung to curves I'd spent years trying to hide, the neckline dipping low enough to be elegant without being scandalous. My hair, newly cut and styled that afternoon, fell in soft waves past my shoulders. Makeup I'd never learned to apply myself made my eyes look huge, my lips full and inviting. I looked like someone else, someone who might actually belong here. Remember, Dante continued, his hand covering mine, you're nervous, but happy. We met at Giuseppe's, fell in love quickly, and I proposed 2 weeks ago. You're overwhelmed by my world, but trying to fit in. Most importantly, his fingers tightened slightly, you're mine. No one touches you. No one gets too close, and if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you find me immediately. The possessiveness in his voice sent shivers down my spine. Why would anyone make me uncomfortable? Because you're fresh meat in a shark tank. His expression darkened. These people will smell vulnerability and circle. They'll ask invasive questions, make cutting remarks disguised as compliments, try to figure out why I chose you. Don't give them anything real. What do I give them instead? What they expect to see. He studied my face, his thumb absently stroking my knuckles. A girl who got lucky, who knows she doesn't deserve me but is too in love to care. Let them underestimate you. It's exactly what we want. The car stopped, and I saw the red carpet stretching from the curb to the hotel entrance. Photographers already positioned behind velvet ropes, flashbulbs popping as other guests arrived. My breath caught. I can't do this, I whispered. Dante, I can't. Yes, you can. His hand moved to cup my face, forcing me to look at him. Because you're stronger than you think. Because you've survived worse than a few rich people with opinions. And because I'll be right beside you the entire time. Why do you care if I can do this? The question escaped before I could stop it. It's just a bet. If I fail, you lose money, but it's not about the money. His jaw tightened. I chose you, Sophia. That makes you my responsibility, and I protect what's mine. Marco opened the door before I could respond, and suddenly we were being pulled into the glare of camera flashes and shouted questions. Mr. Salvatore, is it true you're engaged? Who's your mystery woman? Sophia, look this way. Dante's arm went around my waist, solid and possessive, guiding me through the chaos. I tried to smile like Francesca had taught me, not too wide, mysterious, like I had secrets worth knowing. The cameras loved it, flashes intensifying, photographers jostling for better angles. Inside, the hotel's ballroom was even more overwhelming than the red carpet. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over hundreds of guests in designer gowns and expensive tuxedos. A string quartet played in one corner. Servers wove through the crowd with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than my weekly salary used to be. Everyone turned to look at us. Conversations paused mid-sentence. I felt the weight of their assessment, their judgment, their curiosity sharp as knives. Dante Salvatore, a voice boomed, and a large man with silver hair and a red face approached, hand extended. About time you made an appearance. And who is this lovely creature? Carlo Marchetti. Dante's voice remained neutral, but his hand tightened on my waist. Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Sophia Russo. Carlo's eyes traveled over me with unmistakable appraisal, and I felt Dante's body tense beside me. Russo? Any relation to the Russos in Queens? No, I said, finding my voice. Just a common name. Indeed. Carlo's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, congratulations on catching our Dante. Many have tried. Few have succeeded. I didn't catch him, I said, before I could think better of it. We caught each other. Something flickered in Carlo's expression. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. Dante's thumb stroked my side in what might have been approval. If you'll excuse us, he said smoothly, already steering me away. I need to introduce Sophia to a few other people. We moved through the crowd, and the pattern repeated. Men assessing me with varying degrees of interest or disdain. Women sizing me up with sharp eyes, their smiles brittle and false. Everyone wondering the same thing. Why her? Dante, darling, a woman in a blood-red dress materialized in front of us, her perfectly manicured hand landing on his arm with familiar ease. She was stunning. Tall, thin, with the kind of beauty that came from genetics and expensive maintenance. I heard rumors, but I had to see for myself. Isabella. Dante's voice was carefully neutral. This is Sophia, my fiancée. Sophia, this is Isabella Romano, an old acquaintance. The way he hesitated over acquaintance told me everything. This was someone he'd been involved with, someone who belonged in his world in ways I never could. Isabella's eyes raked over me, and her smile turned predatory. How unexpected. I always imagined you'd marry someone more traditional. Traditional? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Someone from our world, someone who understands the complexities of the life. Her hand was still on Dante's arm, and I wanted to slap it away. But I suppose love makes us do strange things. How did you two meet? At a restaurant, Dante said before I could answer. She spilled water on me. I fell in love with her apology. The story was simple but effective. Isabella's expression soured slightly. How romantic. I thought so. Dante finally removed her hand from his arm, his movements deliberate. Now, if you'll excuse us, of course. Isabella's smile turned sharp. I'm sure we'll see much more of each other, Sophia. Welcome to the family. The way she said, family, made it sound like a threat. Dante led me toward the bar, his jaw tight. Ignore her. Isabella is bitter because I ended things months ago. Did you love her? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He looked at me, surprised. No. I've never loved anyone. The admission should have reassured me. This was just business after all. Instead, it made something in my chest ache. Never? Love is a weakness, he said flatly, accepting 2 champagne glasses from a server. It gives people leverage, power over you. I don't allow that. Then how are you supposed to convince people you love me? Because with you, it's an act, a controlled performance. Real love? He handed me a glass. That's dangerous. What we have is safe, transactional, honest. I sipped the champagne to avoid responding, the bubbles bitter on my tongue. Around us, the party continued, laughter and music and the clinking of glasses, everyone playing their roles, performing their parts, just like us. Mr. Salvatore, a younger man, approached, his expression nervous. Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Chen needs to speak with you. Something urgent. Dante's expression darkened. Now. He says it can't wait. Dante looked at me, conflict clear on his face. I'll be 5 minutes. Stay here. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone I haven't introduced you to. I'm not a child. 5 minutes, Sophia. His hand squeezed my shoulder, equal parts reassurance and warning. Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd with his nervous messenger. I stood alone at the bar, clutching my champagne, feeling exposed without Dante's protective presence. Eyes tracked me from across the room. Whispers followed me like shadows. I tried to look confident, mysterious, like I belonged, but I felt like a fraud in borrowed clothes. So you're the one who finally tamed Dante Salvatore. I turned to find a man beside me, older, maybe 50, with kind eyes and an expensive suit. He raised his glass in greeting. Thomas Carver. I do business with your fiancé occasionally. Sophia Russo. I shook his offered hand, grateful for someone who seemed genuinely friendly. I'm not sure tamed is the right word. No? He smiled. What word would you use? Maybe. Convinced him to try something different? Thomas laughed, genuine and warm. Diplomatic. I like that. Dante could use someone diplomatic in his life. He tends toward the direct approach. That's one way to put it. The champagne was making me looser, braver. Can I ask you something? Of course. Everyone seems shocked that he's marrying me. Not just surprised, shocked. Like it's incomprehensible. Why? Thomas studied me thoughtfully, because Dante Salvatore doesn't do anything without calculation. Every decision, every relationship, every business deal, it's all strategic. The idea that he'd marry someone for love, someone outside his world, someone who can't offer him power or connections or advantage. He trailed off. It suggests he's changed, become vulnerable, and vulnerable men make mistakes. You think I'm a mistake? I think you're either the best decision he's ever made or the worst. Thomas's expression turned serious. Time will tell which, but for what it's worth, I hope it's the former. Dante deserves happiness, even if he doesn't believe in it. Before I could respond, I felt a presence behind me, dark and threatening. Dante's hand landed on my lower back, possessive and warm. Thomas, I see you've met Sophia. I have indeed. Thomas raised his glass. Congratulations, my friend. May you find what you're looking for. The cryptic statement hung between them, loaded with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Thomas excused himself, and Dante turned to me, his eyes dark and intense. What did he say to you? Nothing bad. He was nice, actually. I studied his face. You look angry. I left you alone for 7 minutes. You said 5. And in that time, 3 different men approached you. His hand tightened on my back. I could see them from across the room, circling like vultures. Thomas was just being friendly. Thomas was assessing my weakness. Dante's voice was low, dangerous. Trying to determine if you're genuine or a liability. They're all trying to figure out the angle, Sophia. What you cost me, what you're worth. And I can't protect you if you're wandering around alone. The possessiveness should have annoyed me. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in my stomach. I wasn't wandering. I was standing exactly where you left me. Which made you a target. He pulled me closer, his body heat seeping through the thin silk of my dress. From now on, if I have to leave you, Maria or one of my men stays with you. Understood? You can't control every moment. Watch me. His eyes blazed. You're mine to protect, Sophia. That means I decide who gets close to you, who talks to you, who even looks at you too long. I won't apologize for it. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't acting. This was real. The fierce protectiveness in his eyes, the tension in his body, the way his fingers gripped my waist like he was afraid I might disappear. Dante, dance with me. Not a question. He was already pulling me toward the dance floor, where other couples swayed to the quartet's music. His arm went around my waist, my hand in his, and suddenly we were moving together in a slow, intimate waltz. I'd never danced like this before. Never been held this close by someone who moved with such confidence, such control. My body followed his lead instinctively, and for a moment, the entire ballroom faded. It was just us, moving together. His dark eyes locked on mine. You're doing it again, I whispered. Doing what? Looking at me like I'm real, like this is real. His expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features before being locked away. Maybe I'm a better actor than you thought. Or maybe, don't. His voice was sharp. Don't confuse the performance with reality, Sophia. I chose you because you serve a purpose. Because you make me look weak to my enemies and unpredictable to my allies. That's all this is. The words hurt more than they should. I'd known from the beginning what this was. A transaction. A bet. 6 months of playing pretend for $5 million. But somewhere between the mansion and the green dress and the way he held me now, I'd started forgetting. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize." His thumb stroked my lower back, contradicting his harsh words. "Just remember the rules. Remember why you're here." But as we continued dancing, his body pressed against mine, his breath warm against my temple. I wondered if he was reminding me, or reminding himself. The rest of the evening blurred together. More introductions, more judgment, more performance. Dante never left my side again, his presence constant and protective. When we finally left, climbing back into the Mercedes as cameras flashed, I felt exhausted down to my bones. "You did well," Dante said, as we pulled away from the hotel. "Better than expected." "Thanks, I think." I leaned my head against the cool window. "How often do we have to do this?" "Events like tonight? 2 or 3 times a month. Smaller gatherings more frequently. Business dinners, family events." He loosened his bow tie, the gesture somehow intimate. "You'll get used to it." "Will I?" I turned to look at him. "Get used to people looking at me like I'm either a joke or a threat? Get used to women like Isabella who clearly think I stole something that belonged to them? Isabella is irrelevant, is she? The champagne made me bold. She's beautiful, sophisticated. She belongs in your world, everything I'm not. Exactly." He met my eyes. "She's what everyone expects. You're what no one saw coming. That's your power, Sophia. Use it." We arrived home. I was already thinking of it as home, which was dangerous, and Dante walked me upstairs, his hand at my back in that now familiar gesture. At my door, he paused. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we have dinner with my father." My stomach dropped. "Your father? He wants to meet the woman who convinced me to marry." Something dark crossed Dante's expression. "Fair warning. He's worse than anyone you met tonight. Don't let him intimidate you." "How do I not let the head of your family intimidate me?" "By remembering you survived years of poverty and hardship with your dignity intact." His hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "You're stronger than you know, Sophia. My father will see that, eventually." The gentle touch, the almost compliment. It was becoming harder to separate the performance from something real. "Dante. Good night." He stepped back, putting distance between us. "Lock the connecting door if you want." "I won't use it." He disappeared into his own room, leaving me standing in the hallway, my heart racing and my thoughts tangled. Inside my room, I stripped off the green dress and expensive jewelry, washing away the makeup until I looked like myself again. Plain, ordinary. The fat girl playing dress-up in a world she'd never really belonged to. I didn't lock the connecting door. I told myself it was because I was too tired. Because it didn't matter. Because Dante had promised not to use it anyway. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, I knew the real reason. I wanted him to have access, wanted the possibility of him walking through, breaking down the walls between us, making this fake marriage feel like something more. Which meant I was already in trouble, already forgetting the rules, already falling for the man who'd bought me for a bet, and would discard me just as easily when the 6 months ended. I climbed into bed, the silk sheets cool against my skin, and stared at the connecting door until exhaustion finally pulled me under. Dante's father lived in an estate that made Dante's mansion look modest. We drove through gates flanked by stone lions, up a winding driveway lined with ancient oaks, toward a house that belonged in a different century. Gothic architecture, turrets, stained glass windows that caught the late afternoon sun and threw colored shadows across manicured lawns. "Your father lives in a castle," I said faintly. "He likes to remind everyone of his power." Dante's jaw was tight, his knuckles white where they gripped the steering wheel. He'd driven us himself today, leaving Marco and the other bodyguards to follow in a separate vehicle. Everything with him is about dominance, display, making sure you understand your place in the hierarchy. Where's my place? Beneath him, beneath me, beneath everyone who matters in his world. He glanced at me, his expression softening slightly. "But you don't bow to him, Sophia. You're polite, respectful, but you don't grovel. He'll respect strength more than submission. My hands twisted in my lap, the engagement ring catching the light. I wore a burgundy dress today, one of Francesca's choices, with my hair pulled back in an elegant twist. I looked the part of Dante's fiancé. I felt like an imposter about to be exposed. The car stopped in front of massive wooden doors that looked like they belonged on a medieval fortress. A butler appeared, like something out of a period drama. Opening my door with a slight bow, "Mr. Salvatore, Miss Russo. Mr. Salvatore Sr. is waiting in the conservatory." We followed him through halls that echoed with our footsteps, past portraits of stern-faced men who all shared Dante's dark eyes and sharp features. The Salvatore legacy, generations of power and violence, staring down at the girl who didn't belong. The conservatory was a glass-enclosed garden, filled with exotic plants and the humid warmth of a tropical jungle. In the center, surrounded by orchids and ferns, sat a man who radiated authority like heat from a furnace. Dante's father was in his 60s, but looked younger. Fit, predatory, with silver-streaked hair and eyes even darker than his son's. He wore an expensive suit despite being in a garden, every inch the patriarch of a criminal empire. When he looked at me, I felt dissected, assessed, and found wanting in the span of a heartbeat. "So," his voice was deep, accented more heavily than Dante's. "This is the waitress my son intends to marry. Not fiancé, not Sophia. The waitress. Reducing me to my former occupation like it defined everything I was. Father." Dante's hand found the small of my back, possessive and warning. "This is Sofia Russo. Sofia, my father, Antonio Salvatore. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Salvatore." I kept my voice steady despite the fear coiling in my stomach. Antonio's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Honor. An interesting word choice. He gestured to chairs arranged near a fountain. "Sit. Let's discuss this situation." We sat, and I felt like a defendant facing judgment. Antonio poured wine from a crystal decanter, his movements deliberate and controlled. He handed glasses to Dante and me, then settled back in his chair, studying us like specimens under glass. "Dante tells me you met at Giuseppe's trattoria," Antonio began. "How romantic. My son, who dines at the finest restaurants in the city, falls in love over cheap pasta and red sauce." "The food was good," I said quietly, "and sometimes the best things are found in unexpected places." Something flickered in Antonio's expression. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. Philosophical. "Are all waitresses so well-spoken, or are you special?" "Father," Dante's voice held warning, "I'm asking legitimate questions." Antonio's eyes never left my face. "My son wants to marry outside our world, outside our traditions. I need to understand why. What is it about you, Sofia Russo, that convinced my calculated, strategic son to abandon everything we've built for a chance at... what? Love?" The word dripped with disdain, and I understood then what Dante had meant. His father saw love as weakness, as betrayal of the family's interests, as something contemptible. "I don't know what Dante sees in me," I admitted, deciding honesty was my only weapon. "But I know what I see in him, someone who treats me like I matter, who looks at me instead of through me, who makes me feel like I'm worth something more than my circumstances." It was true, I realized as I said it. Somewhere between the bet and the mansion and the charity gala, Dante had made me feel seen, had given me glimpses of the person I could be, instead of the person I'd resigned myself to being. Antonio studied me for a long moment, then turned to Dante. "And you? What do you see in this girl that makes her worth disrupting our plans? Worth risking the Romano alliance? Worth becoming a laughingstock among our associates?" "I see someone real," Dante said quietly. "Someone who doesn't want anything from me except honesty. Someone who reminds me why we built this empire in the first place. To provide security, protection, a better life. What good is power if we use it only to acquire more power?" Father and son stared at each other, and I felt the weight of history between them, conflicts and disappointments and expectations that had shaped both their lives. Antonio's expression was unreadable, carved from stone. "You're making a mistake," Antonio said finally, "but you're too stubborn to see it." Just like your mother. Pain flashed across Dante's face before being locked away. Don't bring her into this. Why not? She made the same mistake. Married for love, believed in fairy tales, and where did it get her? Antonio's voice turned cold. Dead at 40 because she refused to accept the realities of our world. Because she thought love could protect her from our enemies. That's enough. Dante stood, his control fracturing. We came here as a courtesy, to introduce you to Sophia. If you can't show basic respect, sit down. The command cracked like a whip, and to my surprise, Dante sat. Antonio's power filled the conservatory, oppressive and absolute. You'll marry this girl if you insist. I won't stop you, but understand the consequences. The Romano family will see this as an insult. Our allies will question your judgment. Your enemies will see weakness and strike. He turned back to me, his eyes drilling into mine. And you, Sophia Russo. You'll discover that being a Salvatore comes with a price. Your life will never be your own. Every decision will be scrutinized. Every mistake magnified. You'll be a target for anyone who wants to hurt my son. Are you prepared for that? My mouth was dry, but I met his gaze. No. I'm not prepared, but I'm willing to try. Trying won't keep you alive. He stood, moving toward me with predatory grace. It takes strength, cunning, the ability to smile while your world burns around you. Do you have those qualities, little waitress? Or will you crumble the first time someone threatens you? I survived years of poverty, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Years of being invisible, being nothing, barely getting by. If I can survive that, I can survive anything. Antonio's smile was sharp as broken glass. We'll see. He looked at Dante. Bring her to Sunday dinner. Let the family meet her. Let's see if she survives that before we worry about external threats. The dismissal was clear. Dante stood, helping me to my feet, his hand trembling slightly with suppressed anger. We'll be there. We walked back through those echoing halls in tense silence. Only when we were in the car, the doors closed and the engine running, did Dante speak. I'm sorry. His voice was rough. I should have warned you he'd be cruel, should have prepared you better. You told me he was worse than anyone at the gala. I touched his arm, feeling the tension coiled there. You were right. He's always like that. Always testing, pushing, trying to find weakness. Dante's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I heard the leather creak. My mother loved him anyway, believed he had good inside him somewhere. It killed her. Not literally, but close enough. She died thinking she'd failed him, failed me. The pain in his voice cracked something open inside me. Dante, I won't let that happen to you. He turned to me, his dark eyes intense and almost desperate. Whatever you're feeling right now, fear, doubt, regret, I'll fix it. I'll protect you from him, from this world, from all of it. Why? The question burst out. Why do you care so much? This is just a bet. Just 6 months of pretending. Why does it matter if your father scares me or if I'm not prepared for your world? He stared at me, conflict warring across his features. Then, with a sound that might have been frustration or surrender, he pulled me to him, his mouth crashing against mine. The kiss was desperate, claiming, filled with months of tension compressed into a single moment. His hands tangled in my carefully styled hair, destroying Francesca's work, and I didn't care. I kissed him back with equal desperation, tasting wine and something darker, something that felt dangerously like need. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine because it stopped being fake. He whispered, somewhere between the water and the green dress and the way you looked at my father without flinching, it became real. And I don't know how to handle that. My heart hammered against my ribs. The bet, fuck the bet. His thumb traced my swollen lips. I'll pay it myself. Twice over. 3 times. I don't care. This isn't about money anymore, Sophia. It's about you. About us. About the fact that I can't imagine 6 months from now when you're supposed to disappear from my life. Dante... Tears burned behind my eyes. You said love was weakness. That you'd never. I lied. He kissed me again, softer this time, achingly tender. Or maybe I was wrong. Maybe love is the only thing worth being weak for. Maybe you're worth every risk, every vulnerability, every dangerous thing I swore I'd never feel. The confession hung between us, terrifying and exhilarating. This was real. This was happening. The fake marriage, the strategic arrangement, the calculated bet. It had all transformed into something neither of us had planned for. "What do we do now?" I whispered against his mouth. "Now?" He pulled back slightly, his smile almost shy. "Now we stop pretending. Now I court you properly, take you on dates, let you decide if you actually want this, want me, without the money and the contract and all the bullshit hanging over us. But the contract gets renegotiated." His hand cupped my face. "You stay because you want to, not because you're paid to. We marry if and when you're ready, not because I made a bet with associates who don't matter. And if you decide this life isn't for you, if you want out," he swallowed hard, "then I let you go, with enough money to be safe and comfortable, but freely. No strings. It was everything I hadn't known I wanted. The freedom to choose, the chance at something real, the possibility that this strange, intense, dangerous man might actually love me, not despite who I was, but because of it. I want to stay," I said softly. "Not for the money, not because of the contract. I want to stay because when I'm with you, I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not the fat girl who doesn't matter. I'm Sophia, just Sophia, and that's enough." His smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "You were always enough. You just needed to see it." He kissed me again, and this time it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something real instead of the end of something fake. 3 months later, we married for real. Not the quiet courthouse ceremony we'd planned for the bet, but a full wedding in the Salvatore estate gardens, surrounded by family, even Antonio, who'd slowly, grudgingly accepted that his son had found something worth keeping. Francesca designed my dress, white silk that celebrated my curves instead of hiding them. Maria cried during the ceremony. Thomas Carver gave a toast about love defying expectations, and when Dante slipped the ring, the same one he'd given me that first day in the car, onto my finger and promised to love me for as long as we both lived, I believed him. The bet was paid, not by me marrying him, but by him proving to his associates that love wasn't weakness. That choosing someone real, someone unexpected, someone who reminded him of his humanity wasn't a mistake, but the smartest decision he'd ever made. 6 months after that first night when I'd spilled water on a dangerous stranger, I stood in the mansion we now truly shared, watching snow fall through the tall windows. Dante came up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "None." I turned in his arms, meeting those dark eyes that had terrified and captivated me from the beginning. Not one. Good. His smile was warm, private, meant only for me. "Because you're stuck with me now, Mrs. Salvatore. No 6-month expiration date, no contract, just us, for as long as you'll have me." "Forever might not be long enough," I whispered, and kissed him as snow painted the world white outside our window. I'd walked into Giuseppe's trattoria 6 months ago, invisible, desperate, drowning. I'd spilled water on a stranger and inadvertently changed both our lives. I'd agreed to a bet I didn't fully understand, married for money I no longer needed, and found something infinitely more valuable than financial security. I found myself, my strength, my worth, and I found love in the most unexpected place, in the dark eyes of a man who'd needed saving just as much as I had. The fat girl who served pasta became the woman who taught a Mafia boss that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that love wasn't a liability, and that sometimes the best things in life came from accidents and broken shoes and moments of desperate courage. We weren't perfect. Our life together would never be easy or safe or simple, but it was real. It was ours. And that was enough. Antonio Salvatore died 2 years later, naming Dante his successor with the grudging admission that the waitress made you stronger than I ever could. By then, I'd learned to navigate his world without losing myself, to attend galas and family dinners with confidence instead of terror, to stand beside Dante not as his prop or his weakness, but as his equal partner. The $5 million, we donated it to programs helping people like I'd been, drowning in poverty, Invisible to the world, desperate for a chance, the money that had once seemed like salvation became seed money for something better, hope for others who needed it. I finished my nursing degree, working part-time at a free clinic in the neighborhood where I'd once struggled to survive. Dante's enemies learned quickly that I wasn't a weakness to exploit. I was a strength they couldn't account for. The woman who'd survived poverty and hunger and invisibility wasn't afraid of their threats or their violence. We had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl who inherited Dante's dark eyes and my stubborn refusal to accept limitations. We raised them to understand that power came with responsibility, that money was a tool, not a measure of worth. That love, despite what their grandfather believed, was the strongest force in any world. And sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Dante would pull me close and whisper, "Best bet I ever made." I'd smile against his shoulder and correct him. "Best accident we ever had." Because that's what we were. A beautiful accident that became intentional. A bet that transformed into forever. A fake marriage that became the realest thing either of us had ever known. From water spilled in desperation to a life built on love, that was our story. Messy, imperfect, occasionally dangerous, but undeniably, completely, perfectly ours.